like it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning will now come to order. This meeting is being live streamed. Members, in order for online attendees to hear, please make sure you are unmuted. Your microphone when speaking, please identify yourself when making or sending a motion so that the secretary can capture who is making the motion. For those attending in person, please complete the sign-in sheet located in the hallway in the back. And if you wish to make a public comment, please fill out the public comment card and return it to a staff member. For those participating via Zoom, please keep your microphones muted unless you are called upon to speak. When appropriate on the agenda, we will request comments from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak via the chat box. Staff is monitoring Zoom and will recognize you when it's your time to speak. With that, Laura, please call the roll.
Mayor Bennett,
Present.
Frank Beal,
Present.
President Rowley,
Present.
Mayor Curry, Mayor Grasso,
Here.
Mayor Hobart, Nina Edamudia,
Here.
Mayor Noak,
Here.
President Reinbold, John Robertson, Mayor Rodring,
Here.
Joanna Rees,
Here.
Carolyn Schofield,
Here.
Ann Sheehan,
Here.
Matt Walsh,
Here.
and Redden,
Yeah.
Dr. Kuros Mohammadian. Say it right.
Ladies and gentlemen, we do have a quorum, and as before we proceed, we do have Mayor Noak on Zoom, and I'll entertain a motion to allow him to participate. Is there a motion? Moved in second. Any questions? If not, all in favor, signify by a vote of aye. Opposed, vote of no. Motion carries. Mayor, welcome. First
Thank
item on
you.
the agenda. First item on the agenda is the executive director's report. Laura is filling in for Erin,
Alright.
who has missed her first meeting in 5 years. How's
I
that?
know. I'm glad to be here. I'm sorry she's not. Thank you. I'm Laura Wilkinson. I'm CMAP's Deputy Executive Director for Strategic Advancement. I'm happy to be here today in Erin's stead. She is out in Washington, D.C. It is Infrastructure Week, so she is out there for multiple different reasons. She is on the board of the Coalition of America's Gateways and Trade Corridors, and she's actually moving up to chair of that board while she is out there this week. And right now, at this very moment, she is on a panel at the Brookings Institution regarding accomplishments and challenges in the Chicagoland region called Pathways to Regional Prosperity. So it's an important time for her to be out there right now as we start having discussions in Congress about the reauthorization and how that will impact Illinois. Other engagements that Erin has been up to since the last board meeting, I want to share with you. Congrats to Barrington and Northwest Council of Mayors and IDOT on the groundbreaking of Route 14 and their new grade separation. That project was part of On to 2050 and one of our first projects out of the Federal Surface Transportation Shared Fund that we created here at CMAP. So that was an exciting event. Erin also joined the American Council of Engineers podcast where she talked, oh, thank you. I saw you coming. Not used to that part. Where she talked on the podcast about the state of transit funding and our work on PART. Erin also joined the Civic Federation and the Taxpayers Federation of Illinois on a panel regarding modernizing Illinois sales tax for the 21st century economy that we talked about our joint paper on that subject. And finally, at the request of the Lake County Board, Erin and the CMAP staff presented on transit needs and the PART report at the Committee of the Whole this past Friday. So she has been busy in the last month, and so have the staff. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what's been going on the staff front. CMAP was honored with the WTS Innovative Transportation Solutions Award. The award recognizes a collaborative, equity-driven process that created PART and built it from a ground up of the powerhouse women here at CMAP and shaped a diverse steering committee of civic, community, and legislative leaders. CMAP also kicked off our Regional Mobility Council 2 weeks ago. The council functions as an advisory committee to assess our work on transportation and mobility for people with disabilities. There were 10 community-based organizations that will be participating in this program with a stipend for their time and expertise. We also were excited to host a delegation of 80 international leaders here from the America's Competitiveness Exchange. The event was organized by the Organization of American States, the Department of Commerce, the Department of State, in conjunction with DCEO and the University of Illinois. So we had 2 panels here for that group. One of them discussed the agency's role in bringing together transportation planning and economic growth. And the other one included a bunch of regional partners that really highlighted the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership. And last but not least, on that front, CMAP also had 100 students from McHenry County, District 155, for a day of activities and presentations, where we talked about housing affordability, making streets safer, and designing a regional transportation system. So that's from the staff side of things. A little bit of some news about our work. I'm happy to announce that our climate action planning work that was funded through the US EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant is moving forward after a temporary pause due to the federal uncertainty. The US EPA did confirm that with only minor modifications that we could proceed forward with working on this plan. We are moving ahead and anticipating that that plan will be completed by December of this year. As a reminder, that work is done in conjunction with Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission. It will include some data-driven strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions throughout our region. And once finalized, it will help our regional partners have information so that they can have high impact climate strategies and focus on investments versus avoiding or having fragmented efforts. We've talked to the county leaders about this, and they are really engaged to make sure that that information informs their local efforts. CMAP recently shared local housing profiles that will help policymakers and planners understand key information about their communities. The profiles include a set of housing market data from every county, municipality, and Chicago community area in Northeastern Illinois. It was created by CMAP in collaboration with DePaul University Institute for Housing Studies. Some more information about our transportation resilience projects. We are soliciting these projects to include in what we call TRIP, the Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan. This project list will be the first of the region's compilation of these resilience projects and will help us position the region in a better place for Federal Highway Administration funds called PROTECT, or Promoting Resilient Operations Through Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. We always love a good acronym in government. These solicitations were sent to the implementers, including our planning liaisons for the Council of Mayors and the Council of Governments. And we're also asking projects from stormwater and emergency management throughout the counties in the city of Chicago. These project lists are due to us by June 3rd, and they'll be accompanied by a virtual workshop for the implementers on May 20th. A few more to go. To fuel economic growth, Lake County and CMAP, supported by the Schreiber I cannot say that word, are teaming up to expand affordable and accessible housing in Illinois' third most populous county. The philanthropy awarded CMAP a $300,000 grant to support this initiative in Lake County. So over the next 12 months, a task force will evaluate tools and resources to address the housing challenges and will create a housing ready toolkit. And the goal of this initiative is to increase the supply of affordable housing through municipality-specific solutions. A reminder on our FLIP program. This is CMAP's free summer program for high school students in Northeastern Illinois. We are accepting applications for those high school students that are interested in urban planning and regional initiatives. The 2025 session will be held in person starting July 15th through 17th, and then July 22nd, 23rd. We have field trips and transportation and meals and more, and applications are due for that on June 2nd. So help spread the word. We always get rave reviews on this program. One special administrative note, we are going to be having a special MPO policy committee that will follow our transportation committee on May 30th. This is in order to review and approve the adoption of the 6 county safety action plans that we need to make sure that we approve by the federal end date of June 5th. So we're having a special MPO meeting at the end of May. And finally, as a preview and segue to our agenda today, we will have 3 different items that we'll discuss about the work that we're doing. You'll hear an update on the 290 Blue Line Corridor Development Office and the momentum that we are having right now on that project, building partnership with local stakeholders. You will also hear about a preview of our regional vision work with insights on emerging information from our existing conditions assessment. And lastly, you'll receive a timely update on legislative activity at the state and federal level. These updates will showcase how we are advancing our initiatives and our planning. And with that, it concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well done.
Thank you.
Any questions with the executive director's report? None being, we'll move on to the next item, which is the consent, which includes the minutes of our last meeting and 4 contracts. Information is sent to you. Chair welcomes, Robeson. Welcome.
Morning.
Items of 401 through 404. Are there any questions on those contracts at all? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the consent.
Motion
agenda.
approved by no.
Second by Rodrick.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? If not, all in favor signify by a vote of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote of no, and the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 501, which is the Blue Line Corridor update. And Phoebe and Justin.
Sorry. Good morning, everybody. We're here today to provide you an update on the I-290 Blue Line program. I'm Phoebe Downey. I am the program manager and principal here at CMAP. Behind me is Justine Sadello. She is the team lead for our consultants for the CDO, the Corridor Development Office. As you'll remember, back in September, we came to you. Hold a little. Okay. As you remember, in September, we came to you kind of asking to approve the contract with Justine and her team, and it's been 6 months since then. So we wanted to provide you on the update of all the work we've been doing kind of in that time. Next slide. So just as a context, what we're talking about when we talk about the I-290 Blue Line Corridor program here at CMAP, it's a 13.5-mile corridor. It touches 7 suburban municipalities, 5 Chicago community areas. The program currently includes 11 CTA stations, 46 bridges and interchanges from IDOT, but also some local roads and streets. We expect this will grow as we develop the program further. Next slide. Kind of why did we start this effort? I think everybody who lives in this region is aware that it's a corridor in need. There were 2 existing regionally significant projects from IDOT and CTA to address the corridor's aging infrastructure and congestion, but the magnitude of the improvement required calls for a more strategic and coordinated investment to modernize roadway and transit network, as well as to address community connections and accessibility. The program's success will be dependent on identifying suitable funding streams that are sustainable and gaining stakeholder buy-in to capitalize on this opportunity. As you'll remember, like for the last 2 years, CMAP has been working with our partners, the lead agencies on this project, CTA and IDOT, as they have their current existing regionally significant projects. But we have numerous other partners we need to be working with in the corridor and have begun that process. The I-290 Blue Line Corridor Development Office is a multi-agency effort to advance a program of roadway, transit, and community corridor projects that will improve mobility, access, and safety for corridor users. The program of projects will address current state of good repair and future enhancements to infrastructure that align with a unified corridor vision. We convened these partners to formalize this kind of partnership. Under the CTO, we created a program governance structure and we released the RFP for the CDO program service team. The board approved that in September, and Justine is going to provide some updates on what we've been working on with them.
Good morning, everyone. It's a true pleasure to be here with you all this morning. My name is Justine Sadello. I am the program manager for our program servicer team. Oh, thank you.
That's for the tall people.
I know.
So representing the consultant team supporting the agencies on this effort, lots of good work underway. Really excited to provide a deeper dive update for you all. So this slide highlights the 4 core work streams, if you will, of what we are supporting the Corridor Development Office on. As Phoebe highlighted in her opening remarks, and as you're familiar with, we're really trying to set a new model for regional collaboration around a corridor, which is certainly inspired by the great partnerships we've seen in this region through the CREATE program. So what's different now for these projects that have been talked about in this region for some time is that we're really trying to move forward with a much bolder vision, if we're going to be investing billions of dollars to improve state of good repair on these infrastructure facilities, how do we really think bigger picture about the true economic development and quality of life improvements that can be made if we expand, if we think beyond the right of way and we think about some of those community projects that should come to this program and really help us make the case for the significant funding needs that come along with it. But that ultimate mission of this charge really aligns well with CMAP's guiding principles and what priorities that are set forth in the long-range plan. So first and foremost, we're working toward establishing a more holistic, inspiring corridor vision that aligns with more than just those mobility benefits, but how do we see true improvements to quality of life and economic development through the significant investment spurred by transportation infrastructure, but really has much more wide spanning benefits. Well, also then it's a great opportunity to really be coordinating program implementation. As I'll share this morning, there is already a lot of work underway in the corridor. So by thinking multimodally and working with our partners, how do we really take it a step further in terms of thinking about how we stage and sequence these projects to minimize impacts on the traveling public and take advantage of the funding opportunities as they're there. There's certainly a lot of work to be done to align costs. So when we're talking about different types of infrastructure projects and bringing in some new ways to really enhance the corridor, that we have up-to-date programmatic costs, and we're thinking about how we can really bring those expanded and enhanced benefits. One great example of early start of success for collaboration with not just CTA and IDOT, but the variety of local transportation agencies and municipal partners as well. We're actually partnering with the Tollway to have an e-builder project management information system to just better share information amongst transportation agencies. Sometimes things like that seem like low hanging fruit or not that big a deal, but really bringing the partners together to be able to collaborate in this way will be a huge step forward. Once we've sort of gathered and figured out how much bigger we want to make this program to align with the vision, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to pay for it. So that's a sticky one. Unfortunately, spoiler alert, there's not going to be one magic bullet source of funding to help us fill this funding gap. So how do we start to explore all the options that are on the table, narrow those down based on feasibility, and be both opportunistic and nimble while not forgetting that long term, because we are going to be at this program for a decent amount of time here to really do it right. We'll also be exploring different delivery models that could be leveraged. IDOT for their drainage project is going to be leveraging CMGC for the first time here coming up. So there's no easy button, but hopefully by building a program that's aligned with this ambitious vision, that'll help us build the support that we need to make some tough decisions about how we're going to pay for things, which ties to that next final important tenet of how we engage stakeholders to understand their priorities. You know, people that live along this corridor have heard CTA and IDOT talk about these projects for a long time. So we need to be able to clearly communicate what's different now, why now really is that opportunity to work together as a region and do some really big inspirational things along this corridor. And ideally, this can be a model for future regional collaboration around multimodal corridors once we've really hit the ground running and get some more success under our feet here along the 290 Blue Line corridor. So just a slightly deeper dive on what we've done in the last 6 months and what's ahead in these various work streams. We've had 2 different workshops, first with the CDO partner agencies, and then what we refer to as management committee, which largely consists of the partners that Phoebe highlighted previously, to identify some top-line vision themes. It is going to be very important for us to continue vetting that vision with key regional stakeholders, because when we're ready to really launch this in a big way, we want everybody standing alongside these CDO agency partners, sharing in that commitment to making this corridor a reality. From the program development side, we've been gathering lots and lots of information on existing projects from IDOT and CTA and starting to do that with partner agencies along the corridor. I know I've referenced CREATE previously. We are leveraging their committee structure for inspiration for how we work with different agency partners and community leaders. So far we've launched the management committee. We have a group thinking about advocacy, and then at the implementation working group, which features many familiar faces from our transportation agencies, is digging in on that project side. From funding, financing, and delivery, we finalized our work plan and have pulled together all the current funding commitments and obligations, which I'll walk through at a high level. Certainly dynamic times, even since our program servicer team was brought on board, for what we can be expecting to come or not come from the federal side of things. And then from a messaging side, we are here with you today because we are planning in several weeks to have a soft launch of the program where the name for the program, branding, and a fact sheet with some basic information on a website will be shared, but it's really later this year where we'll be making the bigger splash, rolling out the vision, talking about a more definitive, bigger picture program. Right. So I mentioned the importance of a vision based on the 2 workshops we've had so far and coordination with some of those committees. We've established several top line themes that we believe will guide the vision. Again, vetting this with important key regional stakeholders is certainly going to be important, but it shows at a top level what we want that corridor to achieve, again, thinking beyond just mobility, but then also how are we going to do that with partnership and how we engage with stakeholders being a really key piece there. So this vision will be really critical in terms of helping agency leaders make decisions about what does make it into the program. How do we ensure that we're not just replacing in kind, but we are doing that bigger picture, thinking about those community enhancements that can come in and really make a difference. So we'll certainly have a vision that's easy to describe to general stakeholders in the region, but we'll also, from a technical side, break this down a lot further as well, so we can actually be able to quantitatively measure how certain project elements really make a difference and help us achieve this vision. All right, so I've highlighted this framework in terms of how we're building the program. So folks are most familiar with what is in what CTA has currently envisioned for the Forest Park branch, what IDOT has been planning, but will be revisiting for 290. And then how do we think about some of those additional corridor projects, especially from the communities that can come in? So what we've done so far is identifying those base projects from CTA and IDOT, as well as opportunities for enhancements. So what do I mean when I say enhancements? When you think about whether or not you've taken the blue line or if you've driven on 290, thinking about accessing those train stations when you're, walking down this long, narrow ramp, traffic beside you on both ways, how can we think now about how we re-envision those stations, not just from an accessibility perspective, but really more of that holistic user experience? Because right now, that type of enhancement to those stations isn't currently planned or costed. Another example would be reopening some of the stations that were closed along the blue line, just being able to take a look and make a decision on if that is something that aligns well with the vision we want to move forward with. So for work ahead, we are starting the process of engaging not just with the fellow transportation agencies, but communities along the corridor to get some of their thoughts on what those enhancements to this overall program should really come into the fold, even if they're not led by CTA or IDOT, but really are part of that program that we're all working toward together. On the next slide, it highlights, this is the sort of like the base state of good repair, what's already been planned. So again, when we're thinking about what folks in the communities have been hearing about this program up until now, it's really focused on these projects. But again, we aspire to go bigger and bolder here. And then on the next slide, it's nice we're not starting here from ground zero, right? A lot of money has already been invested to date in the program. So 1.65 billion committed. 1 billion of that is from IDOT's MYP, multi-year program that was released last year. CTA has committed over 300 million funds to complete phase 1 of a track rebuild, and they're nearly complete with both the Racine station upgrade with Pulaski up next. I did reference the federal funding that had been identified. So over 300 million in federal grants has been awarded, but not all that money's been obligated. So at this point of that 300, we think between 170 to 190 million could end up being at risk. So all the more reason for us to work together as a region and really show some leadership in prioritizing this corridor. You can see here on the slide the different types of benefits that the projects that are underway are going to provide. There was really a focus on how do we address safety, accessibility, and mobility, but also not be doing something now that precludes future opportunities that better align with that big picture vision. So with that, I'll turn things back to Phoebe. Thanks.
Thanks, Justine. And as a follow-up to that slide, kind of like 1.65 billion, obviously a lot of funding. We have a lot more funding to go. Laura will say billions and billions if she's allowed. But as a regional agency, CMAP is working to ensure that we help our local municipal partners leverage this investment that IDOT and CTA is already making. So the projects that are underway and the projects that are planned through the CDO, as well as ongoing CMAP technical assistance, we will be working to identify existing community plans and current community needs that align with the program vision, but also align with kind of the current state of work. If IDOT is reconstructing a bridge and there's going to be a bike lane on it, and we know that community has a bike lane plan that isn't necessarily yet implemented, will help to make sure that they're at the project phase so that these can be aligned. Like, we don't want IDOT building a bike lane to nowhere. If there's a bike lane plan by the community, that's kind of where CMAP and the CDO can help fill in some of those gaps. We'll work with partners to explore funding and delivery options and provide project development to ensure projects are at a project phase that aligns with the lead agency scheduling and sequencing approaches. And final slide. Thank you. Ready to take any questions. I think Justine did a great job of kind of summarizing what we've done, but also what's coming up. But just as a reminder, kind of a soft launch over the summer for program branding. This really will kick off our deeper engagement and strategic coordination with our stakeholders, our elected officials, and other municipalities in the area. We will have a kind of a continued deliberation and discussions around funding and financing, and also how this program could perhaps be leveraged to further other regional policy conversations around transportation funding. And we will be working to get more detailed cost estimates so that we can start to really define what is the program of projects and how much it's going to cost to deliver them.
Good
Thank
question.
you.
Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. You know, a lot in that. Can you go back to the slide that had the blue line on one slide? Yeah, that one. So I have to put my glasses on for this. So on the blue line, you're trying to rebuild 7 rail stations, replace entire track bed, upgrade I don't know what traction power system is, but it must make it go. And the Forest Park Terminal on one side. On the other side is 13 miles of expressway, replacing rehab, et cetera. So all of that is going to cost more than $1.6 billion.
Billion.
I mean, it seems, I mean, it's a question from the 20th century, I suppose, but that doesn't, I mean, that seems ambitious. It doesn't seem to be the biggest project in the world. And yet 7 rail stations, 13 miles of expressway is going to cost over 1.6 billion X dollars.
Laura, do you want to speak to?
So yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit. This is part of the reason we got into this in the first place, is that both of these have been identified, right, as regionally significant projects. They've also been paused because of the cost. Just to be very clear, that in 2017 dollars, so not 2025, that's estimated to be over $6 billion worth of construction projects. So it has not moved forward. And while it is very critical infrastructure, again, for safety issues, accessibility issues, we needed to have a discussion of how do you fund and finance, phase, sequence, think about how those two things mesh together so they're not done separate and actually cost more because we're not thinking about the interrelationships. And so this is the reason CMAP got involved in the first place of like, how do we bring these together to think about leverage, funding, financing? How do we need to look at this in a different way than these two separate projects just being pushed together? Because it is a big and mighty thing to have to deal with.
Well, thank you for educating me on this, and the numbers seem astounding.
Yeah.
And you have put, you, and by you, I mean all of you,
Uh-huh.
have put in all of this work, great work. But as someone who sits at a, small-time mayor sits at a chair where we think about financing before we think about projects, or at least at the same time. I mean, I'm just throwing out the devil's advocate question here. Are you trying to do something that will never be funded?
So I think one way to think about it is that this is all of it, all in one go. This is like, we very much see this as a phase, like just like with the CREATE project, how it was broken into kind of like small chunks that were more manageable to kind of think about how you could finance and deliver. This like IDOT and CTA are already doing that, kind of like some of these stations, CTA has already, like Racine has already started to do their work on the accessibility. They found grant funding to do it, like track replacement as they get it. It costs about $100 million per mile to replace the CTA track. And so as they're finding that money, they're doing it. So it's not like it has to all come at once, but in order for it to be coordinated and to make strategic sense, and as Laura said, so that we don't have to double do work as we go along, kind of being coordinated and being smart with the way we sequence it. We're hoping to like, one, reduce that cost, and two, to find kind of a sustainable funding stream that's not just like currently going back and forth to our federal partners when they happen to have a bucket of money that's available.
One more, sorry to monopolize this, but rather, I know it's Chicago, we're supposed to think big all the time, but when you see these daunting amounts of money, it would seem to me one way to start looking at this is, instead of having a blue line litany of items and an I-290 litany of items and throwing up a small figure of 1.65 billion that really is $6 billion. At least for me, it would help me if you presented, well, we have X amount of dollars here and we're likely to get Y amount of dollars. And with that, we're going to do 2.5 stations. We're going to do several miles of this. And to me, small victories nowadays in government with the amounts of money that are being required. And at last minute, these items have never been maintained, and now we're in the deep hole that we're in. But I don't see getting out of these holes unless there are small victories, small steps up out of the hole. Whereas, because it's like, this look, to me, I sit here and go, this is marvelous. This is all this great training, but is it really realistic?
Well, I think that's exactly what Justine was saying, is that we're trying to get to this fall, is that we can lay out a plan of not only what are those projects, how are they sequenced, what is the cost, what do we have in hand, what would we need from the federal government, what would we need from financing, what can the market bear for what we're doing? And so I think that is that is exactly how we want to lay out the plan. So you could be like, this is the first part we need to do, that's funded. This is half funded, that we're going to have to fund down the line. How are we going to do that? And so that we can lay that out. Because I think that, again, how this started too was both our congressional and our state electeds, who are very interested, understand why this corridor is so important and the interrelationship to our economy and the mobility and that being able to move around the region want this to happen. And so we need a better plan of how we can do it. And so I think that's exactly why CDM has been brought on board, so they can lay out that phasing plan and funding plan realistically so that we know where we're headed.
And
Yeah, I
this
think
is a
too,
quick
if you
point.
look at a corridor itself, I mean, it's always been a restricted corridor as far as size is concerned. So even years ago, when they talked about the idea of expanding or improving just a roadway, was incredible amounts of money. But I think in this situation, they're looking at the whole big picture. What is all in on that corridor? But I agree, Mayor. I mean, it's you also notice there's no timeline here set up as to how realistically that's going to take place. So your point well taken about, but in even doing the minor things or doing it in stages, it's important that they have to take into consideration, if the money ever came, that they're not constricting themselves or doing something that would then have to be redone at a later stage as far as either the roadway or the access to the rail system itself. So it's pretty complicated. I agree. And
Yeah.
uh,
I also just want to quickly clarify, the 1.65 million is actually already either obligated, like it's basically already programmed for this corridor. So like it would be yeah. So the kind of the enabling projects are already underway and like that's already going in place.
other questions, comments? Yeah.
Yeah, sort of under the heading of big corridor, lots going on there and sort of project coordination. What's the plan kind of interface and ongoing conversation with the freights and FRA? Because that also exists in that same corridor.
So CSX is the major railroad that is in the footprint of this corridor. So to date, we've been partnering with them through our implementation working group, which is where we have an opportunity to really work much more at the tactical level of how we're going to coordinate. But for this corridor in particular, it's really CSX is the main Class 1 railroad we'll be working with.
And they sit on our implementation working group and are part of the governance structure so that they're kind of part of the conversation along with FHWA and FTA. So yeah, they'll be at this point, they're like the jurisdiction, there's only a few places of overlap, but they will be part of the conversation.
Other partners that are formal members of the implementation working group, but didn't show on that slide, also include MWRD and the Illinois Tollway.
Frank?
Yeah, pick up on a point you made, which is that if you look at this list of projects, like reconstructing 5 interchanges or replacing the entire track bed, you're locking yourself into a vision. I mean, what room is there to change the configuration? It feels like you're just taking what is there and improving it. That's all. There's no real vision of a different corridor.
So some of that is I-290, there is a record of decision. There was an EIS done. So that's kind of like what we're working off as our base. But like a lot of the conversation along with the communities and our stakeholders is how we can take kind of the existing plan and provide enhancements or rethink how certain components are done, but while still working within kind of like that record of decision that we have that's existing.
Other questions?
That may be the right answer to the question, which is to make it better, bring it up to date, the 20th century version of what's already there, but it's not a grand rethinking of the corridor.
And I think both Laura and Justine have spoken to this about how some of it is a timeline thing. To a grand rethinking is a timeline issue, but also as we do the work that is currently planned, how we don't preclude future opportunities, and we even put in place ways to leverage the enhancements and the money we're investing already to ensure that in future we can kind of think bigger and continue to think bigger. This is, a 20 to 50 year project.
And just to bring that like an example to highlight what Phoebe was speaking to, if you were to decide to completely realign where the CTA track was, that would unlock a lot of opportunities and also greatly come with costs. So, it's all about trade-offs, but something that may be slightly more realistic. We know Oak Park as a community has been very organized around wanting to cap in their community to help reconnect what was separated with the initial construction. Not all communities have highlighted that same need, but there should be a discussion at this time of what do we want to do, if not in the next 5 years, what do we want to be able to do longer term in the future when we've been able to identify the resources? So how do we make sure when we're reconstructing an interchange or rebuilding a bridge that we're future proofing it in that way for bigger picture ideas that just we might not be quite ready for or have the funding for?
And some of those things are actually really simple to do, like coordinating where all the utilities go so that we know that all the utilities are on the north side of the roadway. And that means that when somebody is engineering to put a cap in place, they can say that's where the utilities are going to be and we can design for that. So these are the kind of like small things we can do now that can really help for future projects.
Good, Mayor.
That was actually my question, was the timeline, but I like how comprehensive this is. I like how aspirational it is. I recognize there's always a dream or a vision of let's improve, but frankly, I mean, this is infill and it's been degrading and it's critically impactful on transit, impacting communities that never should have been split up. And I love that you're working on rehabilitating the bridges and trying to connect everybody better. So I think it's great, and I hope we can find some money and let's start baking brownies.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to Frank, the cost benefit type thing, and whether that's what's priority, more people using the blue line? Is it easing traffic congestion on 290? How would that improve by number of cars? But then we don't want cars to come down. We want them to use public transportation. So yeah, the cost benefit thing, I think, is what addition, what subtraction would take place with the improvement. Thank you both. It was a very comprehensive report. We appreciate it and look forward to a update or follow-up in the near future. Thank you. Moving on to item 502, and that's a regional vision update. I'm sorry, Elizabeth and Austin.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here to talk to you about this project today. I'm Elizabeth Scott, a principal in CMAP's regional policy team. We were here, and I'm joined by my colleague Austin Edwards, also from our policy and implementation group. And for those of you who've been on the board for a while, I can remind you that we were here about a year ago talking to you about our approach to CMAP's next regional comprehensive plan. So as you may be aware, the region currently has the plan onto 2050. We talked to everybody about that a lot. That's what sort of guides our regional work forward. And this is the project. I think we've jumped forward. Yeah, just a second. This is the project. This is the project that will give us our next generation version of Onto 2050. What comes after Onto 2050? So it's still sort of named Baby Plan Vision. We don't know what its name is going to be yet, but we're working on that. Yeah, but so last year we talked to you about our strategy for developing this project overall, that we would be kind of making some changes in how we were approaching the regional comprehensive planning work. In the intervening time, we've been working on pre-planning and scoping and getting mobilized with some consultant partners and getting our ducks in a row and so forth. And now we're really getting started in earnest. So we have some early results to share with you, and we want to make sure you're oriented to the project and you know what to expect over the next 2 years. So Austin and I are delighted to be planning to be at every meeting between now and 2027 to talk to you all about this project, because your role in the success of this work is really, really critical. So yeah, okay, let's go to the next slide. So just starting with a couple of reminders, CMAP as an agency has a couple of responsibility sets that we need to keep front of mind when we're doing this long-term regional work. On the one hand, the State of Illinois Regional Planning Act requires CMAP to periodically make a regional comprehensive plan that includes broad stakeholder engagement. It will guide the physical development of the region and establish the foundation for all planning in the region. The Regional Planning Act also specifies a number of topics that need to be treated in some way, but it doesn't speak to how they need to be treated. It gives us some creativity and flexibility in that regard. And because we're also a federally designated metropolitan planning organization, the federal regs that guide that responsibility also specify when we need to do the regional planning activity, and that this work has at least a 20-year planning horizon, that we involve implementers, FTA, FHWA, and it helps guide our transportation investments, and then also includes, we have responsibilities that have a number of technical things around the MPO planning as well. So next slide. Historically, we have fulfilled these responsibilities by doing one big plan. So we've done, in the 20-year history of CMAP, we've done the Go to 2040 plan, which was the first big plan the agency did after the CATS and NIPSI, our predecessor agencies, were merged to create CMAP. So that plan was created and adopted in 2010. It won the National Planning Award the year that it was adopted, which is a big point of pride for us as an agency. It's a big deal. So we love these plans and the legacies that they give us. We followed up on Go to 2040 with Onto 2050, which, you know, continued in the same vein, a really like broad, comprehensive regional plan, everything about where we're going and what we need to have front of mind. And so we've kind of had this cadence of make the big plan, update it, make a new big plan, update it. And so our new approach is really about spreading that work out over more time. The approach that we're going to be taking with the regional vision, or, you know, 2060 plan, as you can think about it, is that we're going to start with a vision that creates a North Star. And then over the subsequent years that the plan is active, we're going to develop and release sort of action plans, policy plans, more topical deep dive things that will advance on the big picture vision that is set out as the region's goal in this one plan. And the reason that we want to do that is it will allow you know, more flexibility and responsiveness in the planning process. I mean, none of us expected COVID and all of the kind of crazy changes that have been happening in our world over the last 5 years in particular. So our thought is that by talking about things that are going to be really durable and really true about the region over the long haul in one space, and then rolling out a plan that executes on that subsequently can let us respond to the way that our world is changing more effectively over time. So we're doing it. And an example of the types of initiatives that would come under the regional vision and be shaped by its goals and priorities would be things like whatever next gen regional transportation plan is, our climate action plan, something about housing, for instance, whatever the region comes forward and says, these are our highest priority things that we need to be working on together. Okay, so how do we make this? We're going to try to answer some key questions. And a lot of this is about envisioning the future, understanding the future, what a sophisticated understanding of today lets us know in terms of what we can expect as a community, and lets us kind of get ourselves together to meet those major challenges and opportunities that may be on the horizon for us. So try to get out of the space of what am I reacting to in the world today, and think about the 20-year future, the 30-year future, the 50-year future, and what we need to start now to be in the place that we want to be then. And so we're going to ask, where's the region today? Where could we be headed, for good or for ill? What defines the region at its best? How do we want to show up when we face challenges? Where do we want to go? What's an acceptable future outcome for us as a community when facing challenges and opportunities? And if we understand in more detail where it is that we might end up and where it is that we want to go, how can we make a plan to make sure we end up where we want to end up, not just like where we ended up because we didn't pay attention? Next slide. So what will the vision do? Just at a high level, it will be a process that will yield a playbook. It will help us identify the region's highest priorities. We will build consensus on top challenges and opportunities. We will articulate a plan for the region by the region, because the facilitation and the civic conversation and your leadership is a really critical part about this. Because if we identify highest priorities that don't speak to people, that don't resonate with people, that don't reflect what our actual goals are, then that is not a success condition for us. We need it to collaborate with you to get those, to surface those priorities and craft them into kind of a plan of action. And why are we doing this? Well, it's our responsibility, but fundamentally is we know, and we've seen this many times, is the region can do more when we work together. When we, I think it's it's really helpful that you all were just hearing about the work of the CDO. These are long-range problems that need like detailed, organized, concerted solutions. So how do we organize ourselves to attack the things that are going to matter most for our future? Okay. So your role. As regional leaders, you will shape and develop this vision along with input from partners and stakeholders. We will plan to ask you to approve this vision in the fall of 2027. So we're here in the mid 2025. So it's going to be an intensive 2-year process to arrive at the right place. But our goal is to present this document to you for approval in the fall in 2 years. Aaron and our team have started having one-on-one meetings with you all. Some of them have already taken place. Some are going to be scheduled this week and next week. So if you haven't heard from her yet, don't worry. She will be in touch because we, want to understand everybody's, thoughts about this and what success would look like to you. So one-on-one meetings are underway. We're going to be bringing you all a lot of content on this. Working towards, and Austin will talk to you a little bit more about this, a November 4th State of the Region event, which will be CMAP's 20th anniversary and the launch of this project. So as like the most critical stakeholders, we want to take the next months before that launch to work with you so that you all really understand what you're doing. You can have, a really strong opportunity to shape the project plan and where we're going. And that hopefully by the time we have this event in November, we can have a lot of good energy and excitement about where we're going as a region and what this work could mean for us. And then we'll be planning all kinds of activities in calendar year 2026 to generate that consensus, to share that information, to try and craft the regional vision. So that's kind of the broad plan. So more specific, a little bit more specifically, what actually goes into this is what we've been doing since we spoke last was working in the background to really analyze regional existing conditions. So this is the part where kind of ask, well, how's the patient, doctor? We want to look across all of the things that CMAP studies and really understand where are new dynamics emerging that we need to be having concern for, where is the region getting better, where is the region getting worse, and how can we share that information with you and craft it into stories that actually make sense for us to engage in about how things are going and what the role of the civic sector, the public sector is in responding to change. We're also working on a formal scenario planning process to try to look across all the trends that we see shaping our world, our economy globally, to see it's kind of a signal and noise activity to start to refine and understand what are the big things that are on the far horizon that could really disrupt progress or accelerate it. Because these are the long-term things, technological change, massive demographic change, the way we anticipate climate change will affect the day-to-day life in the region that we really need to be thinking about in this process. So we've been working to gather information on that and are starting to be at the place where we have some results to share with you to begin this conversation. And so Austin's going to give you a trend teaser, but you'll get a more full trend presentation at your next meeting. And so, we're gathering this fodder for civic conversation, and we're going to have our launch event in November, and then we're going to be starting a civic conversation around these trends and future opportunities, trying to understand what matters most so we can distill the challenges into, among all of the things that are important to us, what is the short list of things that are really important for us to be putting our long-term attention to. And then, we will, through that process, be able to articulate a shared vision for the future and identify a path forward to take meaningful action on the things that the region has identified. And so this will be some things where CMAP can lead. This will be some things potentially where we'll have to develop new partnerships or raise money. But we're looking to find where we are well equipped to meet the future and where we have gaps. So we're going to have to find out the information and see what it tells us and have some conversations about what it feels like it means. And that's kind of the plan for the next 2 years. And, I'm looking forward, and I know Austin and our executive team as well, looking forward to really working closely with you all to shape this vision together. So with that, here's some trends. We're hoping to get you interested. He's very tall.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Yes, you might have noticed I'm slightly taller than Elizabeth. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Austin Edwards. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst here at CMAP. And as Elizabeth mentioned, I'm helping to oversee the regional vision. And as she was laying out, it is our job to sort of pull people's eyes towards the horizon and think about the far future and how we deal with and tackle structural issues. But we find that people don't come into this space with a blank page. They have a long list of thoughts around how things are already showing up in their day-to-day lives. What we want to do today is talk about some of the regional trends that we are working to understand and maybe plant the seed for the discussions and the events that we expect to kick off in earnest later this year. Next slide. So to get started, I want to talk a little bit about the variety of information that we are folding into the planning process. Of course, our home base is always transportation and its interaction with land use. That's where the bulk of our funding is, where the bulk of our authority is. But in order to prepare for an effective transportation system, you have to have a really good understanding of all the other issues that impact how people live and work in our region. So we're looking at things like demographics. Who are we? How is our population changing? We're looking at the economy. What kinds of jobs and opportunities are we able to provide to our residents? We're looking at the fiscal capacity of our communities. So what resources do local governments have or need to be able to provide public services and infrastructure? We're looking at the environment. What do we see as being in store for our water resources and changes in the weather in the years to come? And how can we play our part in helping to curb some of that climate change? And then we're looking at issues of quality of life that affect how people experience our region every day. So things around safety and housing and affordability. I mean, we're really trying to take as much as we can to understand the experience of residents in our region today. Next slide, please. So we're going to run through a couple of different charts. As you can imagine, we are real data nerds here at CMAP. There are probably dozens of other data charts in the background that we're happy to share. You'll see more later this month. This is hopefully a little bit of a sprinkling that gets you interested. So here you can see our population growth and household growth in dark green compared to some of our peers. Broadly speaking, we are a large region. We have 8.5 million people across 284 municipalities. We've been able to beat back Dallas and Houston with a stick to hold on to our third place ranking. We're very proud of that. However, we also see that our population has remained largely flat since 2010. So it rose to a peak of around 8.6 million just before the pandemic, and then has floated down and settled around 8.4 million as we see some of the changes from the pandemic play out, as well as a slowdown in immigration nationally. And there are a lot of different things going on under the surface that we're looking to understand: who is moving to the region, who is moving out of the region, what does that tell us about some of the quality of life issues here. At the same time, we have seen an increase in the number of households in the region. So we've picked up about 250,000 households since 2010. And as you would expect, if your population remains flat and households grow, that means that we're seeing a decline in the size of households. And so since 2010, we've seen a decline from about 2.7 people per home down to about 2.5, which doesn't sound like a very large increase, but when you multiply that across our population, it has real implications around our, say, housing demand. What kinds of homes are people looking for? What format? How much space? And then if everyone takes up a little bit more space than they used to, then that has an implication for affordability, for land use, and ultimately how people use our transportation system to get around the region. So how do we tie all those issues together to get a better understanding of the different ways that people are using space and transportation? You've heard a lot about changes in transit over the last few years. We are seeing about 15% of people work from home full time. That seems to be the sort of current steady level. But there are, of course, many people who work from home 2, 3, 4 days a week, including the folks here at CMAP. And speaking personally, I would love to have an extra bedroom to use as an office, but that means that that's a bedroom that someone else is not living in. That changes how we continue to build the housing we need for the future region. Next slide. So part of that population change is also looking at the demographics within the population. So here you can see the breakdown of our population by age cohort, as well as the change since 2010. So to the right, you see those bars in hash or in white. Those hash marks mean an increase since 2010. The white bars mean a decrease since 2010. And so we know that our population is aging as our baby boomers move into older cohorts. We also know that people are having fewer children and they're waiting until later in life to start having children. And we see some declines in net migration of young families. That is one particular area that we're going to continue to research over the summer. Overall, since 2010, children have decreased as a share of the population from about 21% down to 18%. And our working age population has also declined from 68 down to 66. That change has been made up from, again, that growth in the older cohorts, of particularly those over the age of 60. And so thinking about how that might flow into our work here at CMAP, we have an older population. We're hoping that they're able to age in place. That means that we have to think about how to adapt housing, whether or not our transit system and our transportation system is accessible to people of all ages and all abilities. So how do we think about preparing for a region that looks quite different than our current population? Next slide. Overall, thinking about the decline in our working age population, that is particularly an issue for overall economic growth, because if you think about really big structural elements of our economy, there is growth in the labor force, and then there is growth in productivity. So how much can they produce in a year? Overall, our economy has been doing well over the last 10 to 15 years. If you've been around CMAP for a long time, you've probably heard us talk about prolonged, slow growth. That really took place in the lead up to the 2008-2010 recession. Compared to some of our peers, we've done pretty well in sort of tracking the recovery from that recession as well as the pandemic. But we do see some differences that, over the long term, how does this play out for our region? Particularly if we compare ourselves to national averages or to some of the Sunbelt metros, we do look to be growing a little bit slower, but we are doing well compared to our peers in New York and LA and DC and Boston. One of the reasons that we saw a sharper decline during the pandemic is because we have the most diversified large metro economy in the US. So we tend to mirror the national average a little bit more. So as big economic cycles play out nationally, we see that show up in our region perhaps a little bit more than some of our peers who may be more insulated given their industry mix. And then the other thing we're starting to think about is like, well, that's the top line number, but what does it mean for the actual work experience of individuals in our economy? So we're starting to understand some of the different ways that people find jobs and opportunities in the economy. Only a small share of entry level or early career jobs provide a living wage, and a living wage for who? So about 26%, 1 in 4 jobs provide a living wage for a two-parent household, but that slides down to only 7% of jobs provide a living wage for a single-parent household. So really trying to understand what is the lived experience of people who are trying to find opportunity and prosperity in our economy. Next slide. We are also trying to think through how our world is changing. So here you can see some of the impacts on our metro and CTA transit systems, particularly those portions that show a high susceptibility to flooding. So we know that we're already starting to feel the effects of climate change. We're seeing more intense storms and worsening flooding. And that has an implication for critical infrastructure that help connect people to the jobs that we are able to provide in our economy. And we're also seeing temperatures are on the rise, and that again has real implications for the people who have to stand on that transit platform or don't have air conditioning in their homes. So we are looking at some of these lived experiences around climate change and how that's going to change our investment portfolio into the future, particularly as we think about transportation service operations and active transportation users. So again, a real area that we want to fold into our thinking. Where could the region end up if these changes pick up in speed or slow down? Next slide. Okay, returning to our sort of like land use home base along with the transportation system. We're also seeing these changes impact how we use land across the region. Here you can see the change in total acreage across the region by different property types. Overall, we have seen a decline in the pace of land development in the region compared to what we saw between 2000 and 2015. There are a lot of things that feed into that. There are market factors, there are policy factors. On the market side, we've seen a change in housing demand, what kinds of homes people are looking for. We've also seen a rise in the cost of construction, the labor cost of construction, the land cost, materials, equipment, things like that. And then on the policy side, that we see changes in how local communities are using the land around them. So for example, Lake and King County have both put more land into conservation than they have into greenfield development. Those patterns look different across the region. So there are other portions that are continuing to add tracts of housing at the fringe of the region. But overall, we've seen a sort of stabilizing of our footprint compared to earlier periods. There's a lot to unpack in those land use changes, and we're hoping to get into it a little bit further this summer. Next slide. So where do we go from here? As I said, we are data nerds. This is what we love to do, is unpack a lot of these trends. So we'll use the rest of the summer to put the rest of these existing conditions together and prepare materials and information for your discussion and some of the events that we are planning in the fall. And then that will flow into how we are thinking about priorities and some of the things that we need to be doing through the vision process over the next 2 years. Next slide, please. Which brings me back around to November 4th. We are really excited to invite everyone back to the old post office to have the State of the Region event. We are aiming for something big and different and bold to try to set the tone of what we want this vision process to look like, to really energize and motivate and inspire some of the thinking that goes into the region. And then also to take stock of the great work that we've done here at CMAP over the past 20 years. We've made real progress on development and transportation in those 20 years. And so it gives us a chance to celebrate the great work that this region has done together, but also pivot to look forward and not rest on our laurels, but keep moving forward. So I think with that, we're happy to take any comments or questions.
Thanks, both of you. It's almost 2.0. How about we call that? I think for Frank and I, who've been on the board since day one, it was an exciting period in the first few years to get to a point to launch a plan. And I think the outreach that took place, the media exposure we had, the trying to get people to understand what CMAP was all about was a very exciting time. And I look forward to this because it's a 2.0 version for this board, especially this board, for your input on that vision development going forward. Taking a look of past experiences, certainly with this agency, but yourselves as mayors and or leaders in your community to get a sense of where we are going to go. And we spent a lot of time last time around with public input as a general consensus of the whole development of the plan. So there was a lot involved that first time around, and we are very excited about to attempt to do it again. And your participation is really critical. You represent all aspects of this region, and that's what this agency has been all about, considering its size, that we take in all regions, both developed, undeveloped, both poor and rich, and certainly to understand, to get an immediate snapshot of what's taking place now, but how we see it going forward. And even as a mayor in your local community, you've been there long enough to know the successes and failures, and certainly yourself to have a vision of how you see your community going forward, covering a rainbow from education to capital projects to infrastructure improvements, et cetera. So your input is going to be critical as to us developing a plan, an exciting plan going forward for the next decade. So we hope everybody engages with the leadership on your individual input as collectively as a board and as we move forward for the entire region to all be a partner in this. So it's another very exciting time for CMAP, and I think our legacy in 20 years speaks for itself, and certainly the awards that we've been recognized both regionally and nationally. And I think even over the last few years with the state of Illinois, who, when we get to our legislative section about funding us after 20 years. But anyway, I think we've even, the governmental agencies in the state and around the region recognize the importance of us, even from being nerds to actually planning things and suggesting things. And for example, the LTA program has just been an incredible success for us, which starts at home. Those monies have gone for individual towns to plan their future, and it's gone a long way. And we certainly want that to be part of us going forward. But as always, we need money to do it. So any other comments or questions?
Yes, of course, I always have comments. Yes, love it. Love the presentation. I also want to point out that I really enjoy the kind of different direction of thinking about the vision and not tying it to a specific number or place and time. It actually reminds me of how general plans are created. Like general plans have elements in them. And so it's nice to know that you all are going to wait to see what the consensus is. But I also think there are just some elements of a general plan like housing, transportation, all those different things that seem appropriate for this. And in my experience, especially since where I became a planner, general plans are required by law. I'm like, oh, this is exactly what, the standard is anyway. So I just wanted to commend CMAP and the staff for taking a different approach, because innovation comes from thinking differently and trying different things. And so just want to uplift that I'm glad the agency is doing that. I also wanted to make two notes that I made privately, but I want to make sure is on the record. One is that I want to make sure that although we're in this very polarizing political environment in which there are the good words and the bad words and words and words and words and semantics, as a board member who's committed to equity, no matter what, I'm looking for, even if as an agency we decide we can't say the words, I'm looking for the system. I'm looking for the operationalization of that. And I think even some of the statistics that you use as far as thinking about the region, who's making up the region and what those communities will be, how they may be impacted, like an aging population, like you said, thinking about more affordability, thinking about ADU units, how do we have naturally affordable housing? Those are all very important and concrete to me. And it does not matter that we cannot use the semantics as a board member, and I hope my colleagues agree, we will be looking for that. And so I don't want that to be an out. Not saying that the staff would do that, but my expectation as a board member is that those things are still incorporated. And also just be prepared if CMAP is not already, the community is going to say a priority for us is equity or a priority for us is opportunity, right? Because we can't stop the community from saying those words. And so CMAP needs to be prepared as to how they're going to translate that, and also be very honest and transparent with the public about why or why not they're using certain words. And so I just want to preemptively say that before we get to November or we get past that CMAP needs to be preparing those talking points now and showing how they're committed to using data and using information to make certain recommendations. And so just be prepared for that messaging. That's what I would like to see as well. Another thing that I would love to see is, and one thing that I think will help with public trust, is saying, okay, for 2040 and 2050, what were the things in that plan that we can point to that were implemented, or like what were the outcomes of those things, so that people understand that we're not just putting plans in front of them and saying like, this is it. Like, I think especially at the November event, having those examples, having tangible examples, or having people who can speak to that will actually help our case as far as engaging folks, because people feel extracted from, especially now when people aren't worried about coming to community meetings because they're worried about ICE. Right? They're not worried about coming to community meetings because their Medicaid has been cut off. So you're really going to have to make a very convincing story of like, this is what your impact was when you gave us feedback then. And this is, so I just want to make sure that messaging is clear and kind of thought of preemptively. And there was one more thing that I wanted to say. Equity, I don't remember, but, sorry. This is the third thing I was going to say. I think guidance on how the region should be using this plan. And what I mean is like practitioners, right? And so like, yes, we have a plan. Yes, people have to use it in order to apply for the LTA program, like they have reference it, but just in their everyday, like the planning department of all of these villages, all of these cities, how do I use this regional plan to make decisions for my city? That is, I think, a role that CMAP can play. And also something, again, preemptively, as we're going through this staging and this visioning, we should be thinking about, as a community member, how do we train them to use this plan when they're talking to their elected officials or decision makers? And also, how do we get the practitioners to use this plan? So again, in a very polarized political environment, they have the tools to move things through and still think about how to operationalize equity without feeling the pressure of, not only do I need to figure it out, but I need to figure out the messaging. So those are like the three things I just wanted to say on the record that I had, again, said privately, but I wanted to make sure that feedback was captured.
Those are all very helpful notes.
Thank you. Like the presentation, to one of Nina's points that I do agree with is that I'd like to see, since from the nascent, the 2040 vision in 2010 and then updated in 2014, if I read the chart correctly. And then you put together a 2050 plan, and now you're putting together a 2060 plan. I'd like to know how accurate the 2040 plan was now that we're in 2025. And I presume that tempers what you've planned in 2020, 2050, or 2060. Probably tempered by finances more than anything else. But I'd like to see how good the prior staff was and what we've been able to achieve as part of the vision of 2040 now that we're a lot closer to 2040 than you were in 2014.
Absolutely. It's particularly interesting because I think as Elizabeth was saying, this is a process that delivers a playbook. We're continuing to have to upgrade our playbook over time, but we would like to keep the parts of it that are most accurate, most effective, and evolve on from there.
Agreed, but I don't want you to be the Bears. I want you to get to the Super Bowl. Okay.
I think that's something that CMAP in general, I think we've worked with a lot of times. People are like, oh, you're planning 10, 20, 30 years out, but we're planning those years out for the work that we're doing today and tomorrow. And I think we kind of have to come back to that when we talk to our congressional delegation, like, yeah, that's 30 years from now. Like, no, this is what we want you to do today so that 30 years out can happen. And I think that making sure we're communicating that to the public who's like, you're doing a long-term plan, what, like making sure that that's really held. And I think to your point, Nina and Mayor Grasso is, I think we have some really wonderful communities that can tell the stories of how the communities have planned using the prior plans and making the decisions. And it actually gives them that guidepost to say, what decision should we make? And we've done it and it's been successful. So I think raising that up as we go through this will be really important. Thank you.
Thank you both. We look forward to November, if not before, obviously.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, we have our legislative update. Gosh.
Good morning, everyone. Austin,
Morning.
thank you for lowering this for me. It's a busy time in DC and Springfield, so I'll start with our federal updates. As we noted last month, surface transportation reauthorization conversations are obviously ramping up. The House T&I Committee opened up a portal for stakeholder comments on reauthorization priorities. We submitted some comments based on some previously developed regional principles for reauthorization. The committee also just opened up a member portal for comments, and so we've heard from a few members of our delegation in that regard. Similarly, the Senate EPW committee is also seeking feedback from members on reauthorization, and we've been in touch with Senator Durbin and Duckworth's offices on that. In addition to responding to these requests for comment, we again will be facilitating some regional conversations to help us bring together different stakeholders to coalesce on some shared priorities for reauthorization. There's sort of two approaches that we're taking to that. One is engaging in conversation with some of our peer major metro MPOs, peer regional councils to develop some shared priorities. And then again, as we did in 2021, we're going to be facilitating a larger regional conversation here with our transportation implementers to identify some shared principles that we want to articulate for the Northeastern Illinois region. So stay tuned for more on that. I know we have a note in your memo about member priority projects. We don't have too much new to share in that regard. As we've done in years past, we do share the list of all tip projects that are included in each congressional district to help guide some decision making as members are navigating how they are going to approach community project funding requests this time around. For the THUD committee, they are seeking requests by May 23rd for the offices that are seeking new requests this time around. It's a little different for each office. So we're going to continue to monitor the federal appropriations process as that impacts our work. All right, on the state side, moving to Springfield, we are continuing to engage with legislators on the Strengthen Communities Initiative, or House Bill 3784, which would appropriate $2 million to CMAP to expand our technical assistance offerings. Again, your ongoing engagement with your legislators is appreciated as budget deliberations are certainly ramping up right now. And again, the goal of this bill is not to have this bill pass on its own, but be incorporated in the final FY26 budget. A quick note on where we are on the legislative calendar. There are about 2.5 weeks left of this legislative session. So next Friday is our third reading deadline and scheduled adjournment is on May 31st. So certainly heading into an active time in Springfield. Obviously, one major piece of conversation is around transit reform. These discussions and bill negotiations remain very active and will remain very active, I think, for the coming days and weeks. Just one item on this that I noted last month to expand upon. We've been asked by several legislators to participate in transit town halls to share more information about the PART report and the fiscal cliff. So just wanted to recap that again. In the past month, we've participated in 3 sessions in Westmont with Rep. Deuter, in Algonquin with Reps. Moeller and Ness, and in Evanston with Leader Gable, Senator Fine, and Rep. Gong Gershowitz. So our role in that was really just to provide some context while legislators fielded questions from constituents about service in their respective districts, as well as the status of the transit reform negotiations. Laura also mentioned that, we have put out the joint policy paper on sales tax modernization. So that has been another point of conversation with some of the legislators in our region, as that is very critical in these transit reform and funding conversations. So with that is all that I have for today. Happy to take any
Thanks,
questions.
Katja. And I had an opportunity to be down in Springfield last week, ran into John Carpenter. He's doing a great job on our behalf.
Yeah.
To be in touch with the leadership. I happened to get a chance to meet with Senator Cunningham and briefly with Speaker Welsh on our funding. It's only $2 million. I whispered that in the speaker's ear because he asked how much. And I think he also indicated that, CMAP does great work. So to any of you who know leadership, because it's going to get down to leadership and the budgeteers, the last 3 days to put this their final budget together is a whisper in their ear about CMAP. Again, we're not asking for the world. It's been 20 years. We've been asking for 20 years. And maybe this is a year. And honestly, I wish it was a permanent appropriation because I have to think we have to go down there every year and do this is absolutely crazy. So anyway, we'll take it this year if that'll happen. And as Senator Cunningham asked me, I said a good portion that's going to be turned right around to local communities for the LTA program. So it's going right back into the hands of local government. So we'll see. And again, I thank you guys both for being down there. And again, members, please, if you know leadership, just 5 minutes, 2 minutes to whisper in their ear about our funding for CMAP. And again, as far as transportation bill, I know our Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, obviously we've been in intense discussion regarding that. We just have a feeling too, and anybody who's been down to Springfield, this has really been a weird session. They don't seem to want to be doing much other than waiting for the final budget to take place. I personally have a feeling that they will not solve that by the end of the month, our transit bill, whether it's kick the can, which they're great at doing. But I think the conflict of both, or because of 2 aspects of governance and then the other financing the program, there are absolutely 2 different discussions going on, and whether one needs to be solved before the other one, I don't know. But usually General Assembly will wait till the last minute on anything. So whether it's a fall session, I get a feeling it's going to be the fall session, that they may not even come up with a final bill, but at least possibly or hopefully it should be a funding aspect of it. Leon, you know that too. I mean, the latest I heard too is, well, or RTA can go to the January 1st. They have enough money to carry him. So that's kind of my feel. And obviously everybody's been in conversation, but Leon, go ahead.
I just echo the point because I can't miss the opportunity to clarify that while the money does not run out until January, the process by which the stuff we have to do in the next 6 months starts happening June. We've already pushed back the budget planning process with the 3 operators, usually starts in May. We've pushed it to June to start in June. So we had maybe some sense of what's coming out of Springfield. But just to kind of clarify 2 points around the urgency. One is the state requires us to approve the funding amounts to the 3 operators by September 15th, which is in advance of any veto session this fall. You've got that deadline, that reality that has to happen. So if we don't have funding certainty, it will be a doomsday budget across not just one service board, which we had seen in the past before, across all 3 service boards. You run on a parallel path, the planning that the 3 operators have to do in the coming months to plan for what will be resulting in at least a 40% cut in service across the board for our region. It will make the transit system unrecognizable from what we have. And that's going to start rolling out in January. Yes, it doesn't happen until January, but there is a very specific prescribed federal process by which the 3 operators have to go through in terms of planning for those cuts, as much specificity as this route versus that route, this schedule and this timing. Those kinds of plans and the angst and turmoil that will cause around our region over beginning in the summer and through the fall should not be underestimated. And I have been accused of being hair on fire and, overreacting to this, but it's my responsibility, and I think our transit agency's responsibility, to make sure people understand what is at risk if we don't find our funding solution. It is it's a structural funding problem. It is not a mismanagement issue. We recognize and willingly and have put forward ideas on reform, but we believe, and we keep pounding the message, that funding and reform have to go together. Because if we're just talking about reform, what are we reforming if we're going down this path of literally cutting, 40% of service across our region? So it's a nuanced point. It's kind of weedy. It sometimes gets missed in sound bites when the media wants a 5-second response. But I think it is really critical, and anybody that you're talking to, echoing that message, I am available. My team is available. We have a 1-pager on that sort of schedule and that timing to help people better understand it. But that's kind of what we're talking about. There is a lot of conversation happening in the reform space, and that's great. There has been less conversation on the funding piece, and they have very much separated out the 2 things. And we just keep making the point that they have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, again, the park plan was presented to them almost a year ago, and they had the entire year, including the summer, to begin a serious discussion. And unfortunately, and obviously, that didn't take place. The second concern that's coming up, if they're talking about the fall veto, is that, as always, there's an election next year, and whether the opportunity to create some new revenue or have the ability to step forward with new revenue, I don't see that happening, knowing the history of the General Assembly. Maybe it'll shock me, but that is also the reality of the politics of Springfield. Mayor, go ahead.
We're preaching to each other's choirs here, but,
Yes.
we get all of this optimism. It's great. It's glass overflowing, more than half full, which is why they want to, they want to change the world. That's good stuff. And yet we're in a political state that governs by crisis, and doesn't look to plan ahead. And that's what you're up against. I have no doubt that reform has to come before money, just based on what's happening. And the fact that you or whomever said, oh, the money won't run out until January, gave them okay, then we can wait till November. So unfortunately, we spend all of this time planning, but we live within a political system that governs by crisis.
John, go ahead.
I want to amplify what Leanne has said. There is a real operational critical mass that the Chicago Transit Authority has to deal with from an operational standpoint in terms of how it plans to provide services for the residents of our region. It's real, folks. There's a single mother who's taking a train or a bus to drop their kids off at daycare or school who's going to be impacted. And so it's not a game. These are the lives of real people. And I would hope, and I would certainly encourage everyone who is invested in public transportation will come to the table not questioning one another's motives and incentives to why they're there. We're all here for all the right reasons. We know that there's a dynamic that we've got to deal with in terms of reform and governance and all of those things. But I don't want us to lose focus on who's really impacted by this. It's not a bunch of planners in a room. It's families. It's people who've got to get back and forth to work. That's who we've got to keep at the center of this discussion. And so, to your point, Chairman, we're going to continue to, our team at CTA as well as the city are going to continue to stay engaged and continue to be participating in the conversations about how we get to yes, whatever that looks like. But it has to be something that is sustainable. It has to be something that is equitable, and it has to be something that takes into account not just what the system needs today, but what is the system that our region needs for the next 25 years. And I hope that as we're having these discussions, like I said, we keep center the folks who are truly being impacted by the decisions that are being made.
Point well made, yes.
If I can just add one final point, thank you for that, John. I think that really amplifies why we're doing this and why I'm so passionate about it, because it is about sort of access to opportunity. It's not really about the transit system. I mean, that's what this region needs. One finer point I want to make on the funding piece of this. Really, the ask of the General Assembly is, sure, we would happily take a check for the transit system, for transit operations, but fundamentally what we're asking for is the authority for our region to fund itself. We're not asking necessarily for monies, big millions, billions of dollars out of the general revenue fund. And that's a nuance I think also is being lost by some in the General Assembly. The RTA is a taxing authority for the region. We levy the sales tax. It would be our board's responsibility to actually raise those revenues. And so it's a finer point that the legislature is being asked to authorize that, but they're not necessarily taking monies out of the General Assembly's coffers. Sure, we'd take some if they've got some and they want to give it, but I mean, that's a finer point that I think is important for people to understand.
It's a very good point. It was a point I made down there too. It's look at, it's our region. We're not asking for anything outside of what is good for our region, and think about that. But you're right. It's to them, it's, we don't want to do any taxation, period. I said, well, it would be tax upon ourselves. But anyway, we're dragging this out. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
It's okay. Thanks. No, that's good. And I just wanted to offer it, although I appreciate the different perspectives from their kind of roles in their work life. I wanted to make a couple comments as a CMAP board member on the legislation. First, on the transit listening sessions that had occurred. I did attend one. Elizabeth did an awesome job. I just think the message that she carried during those transit listening sessions were spot on as to the CMAP board role in this process. And I don't think that that's been articulated enough at the state level, because we do have a lot of experts that sit on this board and those different components get weighed in the conversation. But from the CMAP board, and I say this because there was last year in one of the blogs, it was saying, CMAP's legislation, and I just wanted to make it very clear that CMAP is not carrying any legislation in regards to this transit, their governance or funding part of it. So I think that distinction was very clear in those listening sessions, and I was glad to see those because I was a little weary of that. But I wish that message would also resonate, and maybe I'll put John to the task in carrying that down to Springfield, because that message seems to be getting a little muddled in the conversation. I mean, CMAP did an awesome job with PART, and I think that was the end of it. And we tried to keep it, as nonpartisan and as just, broad as we possibly could for the General Assembly to make their decisions. And I just wanted to, again, emphasize that point that we did good work here, and that's where our part ended.
Yeah, I'll say that those who read Capitol Facts, that they said it was the legislation this week, and we called Rich Miller. We're like, that's not our legislation. We have the PART report, and we stand by what's in the PART report, but it's not our legislation. So if you do see that, we did course correct, but that didn't get printed. So
Okay. We will meet. Oh, I'm sorry. We're still. Is there any other business for the board? Oh, we have public comment. Do we have Garland? Go ahead, Garland.
Hi, Chairman. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Garland.
All right. I just want to make sure that the disability community understands what you're saying, because sometimes there's a lack of communication, and we want them to make sure to get involved in it. So how can you translate in other languages so they can be well prepared for this? Because there's going to be a lot of protests and a lot of feud over this, and they really don't know what to do. So someone needs to help them, how to get them ready, especially in a situation what's going to be, especially with the transit and other things. So make sure that they are well prepared, and they'll make sure that they really understand it. So I just want you to know that the governor here of Iowa will be coming your way this month on the 29th and the 30th. It's the trade mission. I don't know where it's going to be at, but y'all keep an eye out for it for the trade mission, and you'll see Governor Kim Reynolds should be coming your way there. So that's all I have to say. If you have any questions or comments.
No, thanks, Garland. Appreciate your input. Thank you.
All right.
To the board members, before we adjourn, next meeting is our last month, technically of the summer. We'll be off July and August. So please, your attendance is critical. We have things to get approved before that summer meeting or the summer break. So I encourage you certainly to be at our next meeting on Wednesday, June 11th. For the executive committee, we are going to meet immediately after this. So please, those members, as soon as we're done here, let's get on with that. We're running a little late right now. So any other comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All in favor, signify in the usual manner. Motion carried immediately. Thank you all. I give you two.